Happy Wildcat Wednesday, boys and girls. Today's objective in writing is today I will use my family interview to draft a storyboard of my shadow puppet show. So I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of new vocabulary words and ideas that you'll be able to use to help you plan out your storyboards and also to help guide you in writing your scripts for your plays. I'm going to walk you through this step by step. In order to create a storyboard for your family history puppet shows, you first need to know what the elements of drama are. So let's spend a few minutes reviewing exactly what I mean when I say elements of drama. But first, you're probably wondering, Miss Garcia, what is a drama? Well, a drama, or a play, is a story that is meant to be acted out on stage in front of an audience. The first element of drama is your cast of characters. Characters include people, animals, creatures like the genie from Aladdin, and even sometimes things in a story, like the Nutcracker. Remember when we watched the Nutcracker performance in December? Writers use characters to perform actions and to speak dialogue, moving the story through the plot. Some stories have lots of characters, but some only have one, and we call the main character the protagonist. Can you say protagonist? Nice job. Then we have setting. This tells you when and where the story takes place, giving you a time and a location. Keep in mind, time doesn't necessarily refer to the time on a clock. It basically refers to a specific period in time, like during the Civil Rights Movement, or the year 2020, or simply long ago, like in the Nutcracker. In addition to characters and setting, a drama also has a plot. Plot refers to all of the major events that happen in the story. The plot is divided into beginning, middle, and end, just like all of the fiction books you read, and just like the Nutcracker, which we watched in December. Remember at the beginning when Clara first got her Nutcracker doll, then in the middle, she travels to different realms in her dreams, and at the end, the Nutcracker turns into a real human and they ride off into the night together. The beginning is usually where writers introduce characters, setting, and the problem. In the middle, the writer unfolds more major events by stretching out the details of the problem, and at the end, the writer usually leaves the audience with a final message. A drama also has dialogue. This refers to the lines that the actors perform for the audience. It's the conversation between characters and sometimes between a narrator and the audience. In this photo, for example, I imagine that Aladdin is saying, "Check out the view from my house." And Jasmine is saying, "Wow, that's amazing, Aladdin." Next, we have stage directions. These are calls the director gets to make. And they're basically instructions that tell the actors what to do on stage and exactly how to deliver their lines. So looking at the same photo from before, I imagine the director has told these characters exactly what to do on stage. So they've said to Aladdin, "Smile, look happy, stare off into the distance, and Aladdin, you point in that same direction. Jasmine, you also stare off into the distance, also look happy, and as Aladdin is telling you about his view, sound really interested and also kind of surprised." Finally, we come to acts and scenes. Lots of dramas are divided into acts, which are basically smaller parts like chapters or sections in a book. When a setting of an act changes, this creates a new scene. So within one act, you can have several scenes, or sometimes just one, depending on the plot of your story. You can almost think of a scene as a subtopic to your topic, which is your act. For today, you're going to be working on reviewing your interviews to gather the following information. You're going to today identify your cast of characters. So think about, who is your protagonist? Remember, a protagonist is the main character in your play. For each of us, our protagonist is going to be the person that we interview. So, for example, Lizzie, or Mrs. Cavanasso, would have her protagonist be Gammy, who was my character. You also are going to identify the setting of your play. So remember, setting refers to time and location. For Lizzie, the setting would have started in Egypt because that's where Gammy originally was from, but then she moved to the Bay Area in the United States. So it's going to shift from Egypt to the United States. And it's also going to take place mostly in the 1950s up to the year 2020 because Gammy is still alive, and she described most of her interview, though, as taking place as a child. You also are going to be planning out the plot of your play. So you'll be organizing your acts and your scenes. And remember, your acts and your scenes, or your plot, is going to be divided into 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'm going to model exactly how to do this next. Because we're in the planning stage of the writing process, we're going to be using a graphic organizer called My Family History Storyboard to help us organize our ideas before we get started with our scripts. I'm going to model exactly how to use this graphic organizer. Now, at this point, I've already gone back and I've listened to the audio recording of my interview with Gammy. So I have all of that information fresh in my mind to help me fill out this graphic organizer. Now, the first part of this graphic organizer says title of your play. So I'm trying to think of what a really great title would be to describe the story of Gammy coming from Egypt to the United States. I get to be very creative with this decision. It's a choice that I get to make personally, so it has to be something that I like. It also needs to give my audience a clue about what they're going to learn in my play. So something like my visit to Hogwarts won't make any sense. Something like my day at the park won't work. But something like Gammy's journey to America will work. I'm going to go ahead and type that into my graphic organizer. There we go, all set. My title is written neatly at the top of my page where it says title of my play is. And I decided on Gammy's journey to America. Next up, I have to come up with my cast of characters. So the first part says protagonist. I know that my protagonist is going to be Gammy. Then it says other characters. So some other characters that Gammy talked about included her mom, Dina, her dad, Yusuf, her sister, Sarah, her other sister, Elizabeth, and her brother, Yusuf, named after his father. Great. Cast of characters, check. I wrote Ali as my protagonist because to the rest of the world, Gammy isn't known as Gammy. It's only to her grandchildren that she's known as Gammy, so I wrote in her real name. I also included the list of other characters that she talked about who are basically her family members. Now, in my play, I'm going to be telling Gammy's story from her perspective. So, she wouldn't call her own mom Dina and her dad Yusuf, but I did include their names in case the narrator, who is also on my character list, wanted to introduce the characters by name. So notice also I did include narrator as a character because I don't want to forget in my mind that I'm going to have a narrator as part of my play. Remember, a narrator is a character who doesn't actually appear. It just gives background story information to help move the play along. So if you'd like to have a narrator in your play, make sure you include the narrator in your character cast. Now I have to go through and I have to fill in the section about the setting. So remember, for setting, I have to fill out the information about when and also where. Now for the setting, I wrote the 1950s for when because Gammy talks mostly about her childhood and she grew up in the 1950s. Later, she talks about what life was like as an adult, but I'm going to just explain that as the narrator. Now, for where, I wrote Egypt, and then I have an arrow pointing to Bay Area because it started in Egypt, Gammy's story, but then she ended up in the Bay Area. So I'm going to have my story start in Egypt and end in the Bay Area, just like Gammy's real life did. Next up is the plot. So I'm starting with Act 1, which is the beginning of Gammy's story. So remember that at the beginning of a play, normally the writer introduces the characters, the setting, and the problem. In our case, Gammy didn't have a problem, but we would just talk about how her family made the decision to leave Egypt to come to America. So that is the problem, even though it wasn't a problem. Great. Act 1 is all complete. So remember, Act 1 is the beginning of my plot. So I wrote, left Egypt as a baby in 1948, flew on my very first airplane to the United States, and came with my family. Notice a few things. Number 1, I did not write in full sentences. They're just quick notes because I'm going to stretch out this part of the story with lots of details later when I actually write my script. The second thing you'll notice is that I wrote my. Even though I am not Gammy, I'm writing it from the perspective of Gammy because I'm going to be telling the story as though I am Gammy. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill out Act 2, which is the middle of my story, and I'm also going to skip ahead and fill out Act 3 so that you can see what the graphic organizer looks like when it's all complete. Yes, my whole graphic organizer is complete. So I went through and I filled out Act 2, and I just wrote a quick, short sentence, and it says, I lived a happy, fun life as a child in the United States. I didn't add in any extra details, but in my script, I'm going to stretch that part of my story out more using memories that Gammy shared about how she spent time with her siblings and some of the fun memories that she has as a child growing up and things that she liked to do, like going to the drive-in movie theater on Friday nights. Now, in Act 3, I wrote, as a grown-up, I can reflect on all of the changes I noticed in the world around me over time, and I also learned an important lesson as a child from my parents about hard work, and I'm going to leave that message with my audience. So I'm not adding lots of detail, just some quick notes for myself so that I know how to lay out my story later on. Next, I'm going to take a blank sheet of paper and I'm going to partition it into 8 equal shares. So I'm going to fold my paper in half. I'm going to fold it horizontally. And then I'm going to fold it into halves again. So I'm just taking the sheet and folding it over. Doesn't necessarily have to be white, just needs to be blank. Now I'm going to take this sheet and I'm going to fold it over again. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and unfold it. So now I have 8 equal shares. Next, I'm going to go through each box and I'm going to label in the corner just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that I have my partition sheet labeled, I'm going to actually use this to create my storyboard. So each section is going to house a different part of my 3 acts. So Act 1 is going to start in box 1. And Act 1 might take up 2 boxes. For some of you, it might take up 3 boxes. For some of you, it might take up 4 boxes. It depends on how much detail you include. Now, for each of these boxes, you're basically imagining a scene in your mind of how you would like that part of your shadow puppet play to look. Now remember, as you're drawing your sketches, just do outlines of things because remember, in your shadow puppet plays, all we're going to see is shadows. So the details don't really matter. In this particular case, stick figures labeled with character names would be okay, but make sure that it's clear to you who each person is, because this is just a planning sheet. This is not your final, right? Your puppets are going to be your finals. So we want to do this kind of quickly, but thoughtfully, so that we can make sure we have all of the parts that we need to move forward to our next step, which is going to be to make our shadow puppets. So here you can see I actually ended up with 2 pages for my storyboard because I ran out of boxes in the first page. So I went ahead and I made a second one. I didn't use all of the spaces, but I did use 2 extras in the last page. Now, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you each page individually, and I'm also going to show you how I come up with my script. On this part of my storyboard, you're seeing Act 1 and Act 2. Well, part of Act 2 anyway. I had to continue, remember, onto the next page because I ran out of boxes here. Now, in each box, I had already numbered each box in the corner by writing the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8. But then you can see that next to those numbers, I actually added some more words. So in box 1, for example, I have the words Act 1, Scene 1. That's because that house is the very first thing that you're going to see as my audience in my play. Now, in the second box, I have Act 1, Scene 2. That's because I'm still in Act 1. I'm introducing my characters, but this time I have a new scene happening because you're meeting Allie in this part of the play. Box 3 says Act 1, Scene 3. And that's because I'm telling a different part of my introduction, but I'm still in Act 1 because in my introduction, that's where I tell you about the problem, which was that I had family in the United States and my family loved and missed them, so they wanted to come to America too. I continued to do exactly what I just explained in each of the boxes. Now I'm going to model how I'm going to practice rehearsing my play out loud because I'm actually not writing my script out. I'm just going to use the pictures to guide my play. So listen very closely. It's not going to be exactly the same each time because remember, I'm only doing this by memory and by looking at the pictures. Act 1, Scene 1. Welcome to Egypt. It's 1948. Act 1, Scene 2. Meet Allie. She's 2 years old and she lives in Egypt with her family. Act 1, Scene 3. Allie's family has decided to move to the United States because they have family living there and they love their family and miss them very much, so they want to be closer. Act 1, Scene 4. At the time, Allie had one brother and an older sister, and so the 3 of them, plus her mom and her dad, are going to fly on an airplane all the way from Egypt to the United States of America. They had to save for months to have enough money to buy tickets because back then, in 1948, airplane tickets were very expensive. Allie's family was excited, but also a little nervous to be coming all the way to a new country. Act 2, Scene 1. Now you can see I've moved into Act 2. I know that I've moved into Act 2 because I have my graphic organizer in front of me, and this is where I get to start talking about my characters in more detail, and also I get to extend my problem out. So Act 2, Scene 1 has a picture of a man and a woman. It says, "Meet my mom and dad. My mom and dad are very smart and very kind. They work very hard and they try to teach their kids, all of us, those same values." 2, Scene 2. Meet my brother Yusuf. Yusuf loves to cook, and more than cooking, he loves eating. He cooks for us all the time. He loves to go to the grocery store to pick up groceries for all of us. That's only because he gets to then cook with those groceries, his favorite thing to do. Act 2, Scene 3. Meet my sisters. At the time that we came to America, my younger sister Elizabeth hadn't been born yet, but my older sister Sarah was born, and she was older than me. I think she was about 4 years old when we came to America. Elizabeth was born a couple years later. Now that I have my storyboard finished, I'm going to work on building my fluency next. So even though I didn't write out my script and I can't read it, that's okay, because in my puppet show performance, there's no way that I could hold my puppets and read my script at the same time, which means that I have to memorize it in my head. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes or the next couple of days going over each part of my storyboard and trying to come up with a script that I can start to memorize. Each time I say what's happening in the picture, remember, I'm telling it from Gammy's point of view. So I'm using words like I and my, and I'm telling it as though I am Gammy. So it's almost like my story of coming to America from Egypt. Now I'm going to practice this many times so that it sounds super fluent, almost as though I'm just talking to you. All right, so for today, as a reminder, you have 2 jobs. Your first job is to complete your graphic organizer, and your graphic organizer is going to help you create your storyboard. The second step is to create your storyboard. So remember that you need to have each scene represented, and it's divided into 3 acts. So your beginning, your middle, and your end. Okay? If it's easier for you to keep track, you can actually use 3 different sheets of paper, and you could have a whole sheet of paper be just Act 1, even if you only use 4 boxes. Okay? You can leave the other 4 blank and then begin Act 2 on another sheet of paper. And then if you need to have 1 more, you can add a 3rd sheet and have just Act 3. So even if you don't use all of the boxes, if it's easier for your brain to keep it organized into 3 different acts by having 3 different sheets of paper, then definitely do that to help yourself out. Now, if you're ready, you can actually start to make your shadow puppets today, and I'm going to link some videos. But if you are feeling overwhelmed or you haven't completed this yet, then wait until tomorrow and finish this up today so that you're all set to make your shadow puppets on Thursday. All right, there's nothing to turn into me today. You're just focusing on your writing. And I'm going to set up an office hours for you to check in with me if you need to today so that I can give you some extra support, because this is a lot of work. So if you need me, make sure you come to office hours. I'm going to post it on our Google Stream, and you'll just be able to pop in just like Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right, good